Chapter 4. The Responsibilities. At that time, life in the village was becoming harder for Draco with each passing day. The townsfolk came to him constantly, each with some new plea or problem. The moment he appeared in the square, people would gather around him. Someone always needed something. That day, he returned from a hunt. He had brought down 3 wolves, the last of the predators still lurking near the woods. Nearly all the deer had already been eaten. He was tired of these hunts. He stopped in front of Jory's house. The man usually handled the skinning. Barely had he dropped the wolves to the ground when Duncan was already walking toward him. "Master Draco, I beg your help. The rash has returned." The old man greeted him, panting for breath. "Not now, Duncan," the mage answered calmly, not even meeting his gaze. Something tugged at his trouser leg. He looked down. It was Serena. "When will you take me flying again, my dear Sloffy?" she asked sweetly, hugging his leg. He smiled warmly and was just about to remind her how much he loathed that nickname when he heard Muriel's voice behind him. "Serena, don't pester Master Draco." The princess stepped closer, eyeing him carefully. "Are you hungry? I can prepare something." "No, thank you," he replied politely. It seemed the commotion had passed, but then he appeared, the former tax collector. The man had developed an obsession with Draco. He wanted to spend every waking moment in his company, asked 1,000 questions, and constantly begged to be taught. All arguments. That he was untalented, too old, that Draco didn't want a student, fell on deaf ears. "Instead of drowning Master Draco in questions, perhaps you could focus on the duties I assigned you," Muriel interjected coldly. The mage might have been grateful for her words, were it not for the fact that she had brought this tiresome misfortune upon him in the first place. In the days that followed, life in the village slowed. The wall gave the people a sense of safety, and the trade, overseen by Muriel's new assistant, ran smoothly. The days began to flow with a calm rhythm. Draco, sensing that he was no longer needed, began vanishing for longer and longer stretches, but that, too, was only for a time. One day, upon returning from one of his excursions, he immediately sensed something was wrong. The village was too quiet. The people were not tending to their usual tasks. They moved uneasily, whispered among themselves, avoided his eyes. Something had happened. He headed for Muriel's home. She wasn't there to greet him with lunch as she usually did. The house was empty. She was gone. In front of it, crying, stood 6-year-old Serena. The mage said nothing. He simply walked over and lifted her into his arms. The girl sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. "They took her. They took my mama." Draco didn't understand. No one had cared for the child. No one had said a word to him. He took the girl in his arms and silently walked towards Farron's house, hoping to find answers there. All he found there was grief. Farron and Muriel were gone. Kayela, pale as chalk, tried to speak, but the words caught in her throat. He learned that along with the merchants had come 3 assassins. In the night, they crept into Muriel's house. Farron spotted them and fought and fell. Roswin spoke through tears, sobbing uncontrollably. She blamed Muriel, claimed that because of her she had lost a husband a second time. The only one she could vent her grief upon now was little Serena. And Serena was alone. She had never wanted her, but now that no one else did, someone had to take care of her. Draco went to find Duncan. He found him kneeling in a small shrine beside the body of the princess. Draco knew the soul was gone. There was nothing more to be done. Even if he restored the flesh, it would be no more than a hollow shell. "What are you doing, Duncan?" he asked quietly. "Keeping vigil by my lady, sir," the old man replied without lifting his head. "Tell me, who is your lady now?" "Lady Muriel, of course." "No, Duncan. Your lady now is Serena. So, where did you leave her?" The old man blinked in confusion, as if only just now understanding what he'd heard. "Miss Serena?" She's with me," Draco interrupted. "And if you ever take your eyes off her again, there will be consequences." His tone, as always when threatening, was warm and polite. "Do you understand me?" He set the girl down, turned without another word, and walked away. He had things to attend to. Duncan groaned and stepped toward the child. The fact that Farron had managed to slay one of the attackers made things simpler. Draco only had to find the body and question it. He knew necromancy unsettled folk, but it was the swiftest path to answers. A body, after death, still clung to remnants of memory. Though the soul had flown, the flesh could be made to not only to obey but also to recall memories and speak. Before nightfall, Draco and his newest companion had found the assassin's hideout. The corpse knew exactly where its comrades would be. At first, the 2 remaining killers were glad to see their companion. That didn't last. They soon realized that, whatever that thing was, it was no longer their companion. Draco could be very persuasive. They were willing to tell him everything before he resorted to necromancy. Unfortunately for them, The mage was having a rather poor day. The two believed they were lucky to survive. They were wrong. The one who died, he was lucky. A little magic was all it took to bind their souls to their bodies. They were no longer alive nor dead. Draco learned that the contact who was to deliver their payment waited in the slave-trading city to the south. Without delay, the mage departed. That very night, with the moon hanging low over the horizon, he reached the city. 3 undead servants accompanied him. He remained only briefly. The trail led further still, east to Lanster's kingdom. And though he didn't yet know what awaited him there, he knew one thing for certain. He would have to speak with the king. But he did not set off right away. First, he returned to the village, with 4 undead in tow. He hid them in his house, where no one could enter, far from prying eyes. Folks should not see them. It would only stir needless fear. But the undead might yet prove useful, especially those 3, whose souls had never truly left. At dawn did he set off east. Around midday, he stood before the gates of King Lanster's castle. The marble walls gleamed in the sun, and the guards, weary from the heat, lounged lazily atop the ramparts. Inside, royal audiences were underway, a day like any other, until he arrived. The mage passed through the gates, sending every guard into slumber without so much as lifting a hand. Draco had no interest in vengeance upon the kingdom as a whole, only those who bore the blame. When he entered the throne room, the gathered lords scattered like startled birds. The guards encircled the stranger with drawn swords, their blades pointed squarely at his chest. Draco had no intention of fighting, nor of negotiating. He met their eyes with a calm, steely gaze. A moment later, all of them collapsed unconscious onto the stone floor. "I've come to speak with you, King," he said quietly. King Lanster rose into the air as though an invisible hand plucked him from his throne. "So, it's true, you possess magic," the king whispered, trying to maintain some shred of dignity before his court. "I have a few questions for you. I'll ask them plainly." Draco looked him dead in the eyes. The king paled, let out a feeble moan, and fainted. He awoke at once, but everything had changed. All around was white. A vast emptiness without walls, without shadow, without end. Only him and the mage, standing silently before him. A cacophony of voices rang out in his head, yet one question rang clearer than all the rest. Who ordered the assassination of Princess Muriel? The king tried to speak, but his voice stuck in his throat. Strange thoughts entered his mind. His own thoughts were talking to someone, to the mage. And there, in that silence, he confessed everything. He awoke once more. Now he was kneeling on the floor of the throne room. Draco stood over him. "You will answer for your treason and the attempt on Muriel's life. You are no longer king," he said coolly. Then, turning to those few who had managed to stay conscious, he added, "Good folk, choose yourselves a new ruler. The reign of Lanster has come to its end." Then he vanished, taking the king with him. Lanster fell face first into the mud. The castle was gone, or rather, it now stood elsewhere. They were in the forest. "Why did you kill her?" Draco asked. His voice was soft but taut like a bowstring. "I wanted to see if you were truly powerful," Lanster replied with pride. "You clearly aren't. You failed to save her." The mage was silent for a moment, measuring him with his eyes. "You tested me by risking Muriel's life. You played at building a village in the wilderness while I waged a war. I've lost hundreds of good men. I sacrificed vast lands to slow the cultists' advance. For a century, they've spread like plague. Don't fool yourself into thinking her life meant anything against that. Enough. You've said plenty." Draco's voice had turned to stone. He raised his hand. Lanster collapsed to the ground, howling. His body convulsed. His garments turned to dust. He screamed until his voice broke, then fell silent. Naked and trembling, he looked up at the mage. Who are you?" he rasped. "From this day forth, Lanster, you will serve Serena. You will not raise your hand against her. You will not think of betrayal." Draco began to chant in a tongue not spoken by men. Dark markings appeared on Lanster's body. They flared with fire, then faded, leaving behind burned in runes. Moments later, the marks vanished. On the 4th day, the mage returned to the village, leading a plump, half-naked man on an iron chain. His feet were caked with mud, his eyes hollow. The man stumbled over his own steps, but Draco never once glanced back. Kaela watched in disbelief. The villagers were beginning to gather. "Who is that man?" she asked, recoiling slightly. "A servant," Draco said curtly, and without slowing, led him toward Muriel's house. He had no name. He needed none. His only task was to serve little Serena. No one dared question it, though all in the village knew that here everyone was free. Everyone, except one. After Muriel's death, everything changed. The village had lost its princess, and the people, as if a piece of each of them had vanished too. A few departed. The rest turned inward. Houses once full of life fell silent early each evening. Serena didn't understand. She only knew her mother wouldn't return. The emptiness left behind was too great for a child to grasp. Draco barely left her side. He stopped vanishing without a word. Even at night, he sat watch beside the girl. He did what he could. Sometimes he conjured a water serpent to chase her around. Sometimes he built tiny granite houses where she and Falmer would hide. Often he'd lift her into the sky, soaring above the forest, letting her laugh to the heavens. In the evenings, colorful wisps would dance for her. All of it was a gesture of magic, but also of heart, to restore even a shadow of joy to the child. She liked it. Sometimes she'd laugh out loud. Other times, she'd simply snuggle into him and whisper, "I miss Mama." Draco said nothing then. There was no spell for words like that. Sometimes Falmer joined their games. He was a year older than Serena, though smaller. Torrin pretended he was too grown for such nonsense, but Draco caught him stealing glances more than once. Their evenings together became a ritual. Small things, perhaps, but something in them bound the village closer. Duncan, the old teacher, also spent long hours with the children. He taught them their letters and numbers, told stories of kingdoms and distant mountains. He wasn't the finest tutor, but his warmth made up for it. Even when his tales strayed, they drew the children in. As for the servant brought by Draco, he always lingered in the shadows. Always ready when needed, never drawing attention. Draco soon realized they needed someone else still. A woman's touch, a gentle hand. Serena needed it. It didn't take long to find a maid for her on the southern markets, where slaves from every land were sold. The woman was warm-hearted and kind. Draco knew how to secure her loyalty. And Serena still called the maid Sloth, no matter how many times he told her not to. He no longer objected. He made peace with the nickname. Only when Falmer started saying it with a little too much enthusiasm would Draco tap him gently on the forehead and murmur, "You don't have that privilege, lad." The months rolled on. Winter gave way to spring. Green spilled across the hills like a river of life. The village stirred. The children grew. Serena's 7th birthday was drawing near. That day, the girl led Draco to a secluded spot, far from the village. Much had changed in the region over the past few years. Where once there were quiet groves, now stood houses. As the mage walked away from the homesteads with the little blonde girl, he felt a strange, familiar weight settle on him. When they finally stopped, the girl looked up at him with a seriousness far beyond her years, standing straight and resolute. "Help me reclaim the crown. I want to end the war and rebuild my country. If you agree, I'll be your wife." She spoke quickly, but her courage never wavered. Her voice was soft yet firm. Draco raised a brow, surprised. A faint smile tugged at his lips, full of disbelief. "My wife? Don't you think you're a bit too young for that? I've nothing else to offer you. You're adorable." He sighed, gently ruffling her hair. "Tell me, where did you get that idea? Did someone put it in your head? Mama always told me she was meant to be queen. Now that she's gone, I should be queen. Aren't you a little young for that too?" "You're only 7, Draco asked. "There are still people suffering." "They need me," she cried with fierce conviction. "All right, I'll help you, Serena," Draco sighed. He wasn't sure it was the right decision. Then, with a teasing tone, he added, "But stop calling me Sloth. I promise I'll try to," she replied with a resolute smile. "Fair enough. And remember, you're still far too young to think about husbands." It was a crucial moment that forever changed the course of history. A moment that sealed the fall of the northern cultists. Until now, Draco hadn't paid much attention to the cultists. He'd kept his distance. But now, bound by his promise, he decided to get to know them better. He visited the cities of the Western Land. What he saw surprised him. He wandered through the streets, where people didn't hide in fear, and the houses looked well kept. To his surprise, he discovered that the areas under the Beaver sect's rule were prosperous. There was no hunger, poverty, or oppression. At least no more than in other places he visited. The sect systematically eliminated the aristocracy, but left the common people alone. The cultists served as priests and magistrates. The troops serving the cult seemed to have considerable autonomy. Observing the soldiers, the mage concluded that they had most likely joined voluntarily, for profit. There was no indication of forced conscription. The army was disciplined. The soldiers tended not to harass women, and they tended not to rob merchants. Everything looked so good that Draco almost considered a diplomatic resolution to the conflict. If only it weren't for the regular, public sacrifices. This practice stirred more something than just intense dislike in Draco. It was also problematic for other reasons. His reconnaissance resulted in the relocation of several mothers and children to the village. Interrogation of the terrified women revealed unequivocally that their greatest offense was their origins.